Welcome to Investible Partnerships, where we talk to industry leaders about growing revenue-generating partnerships. I'm your host, Des Russell, and co-founder of Partner Elevate. And the daily battle for partner success is forcing channel leaders to rethink how to maximize their relevance and value so they can be a driver of partner impact. So let's jump in and find out how. Hey, Chris, and welcome to the Investible Partnerships podcast. It's so good to have you here, joining the conversation and helping our audience learn about how you are being a driver of partner impact at AWS or Amazon Web Services. So let's first get to know a little about you, a bit about your background, how you got into partnerships, what you're doing in your role, in your worldwide role at Amazon Web Services. So over to you.
Des, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm super excited with the opportunity to chat to your listeners. So thank you for setting this up. So I was originally from Australia, so you can probably hear the accent, or hopefully you still can. I currently live in New York, and with AWS, I look after our industry technology partnerships. So what that means is partnering with companies where their intellectual property is pretty specialized to one industry. And our team focuses on all of AWS's strategic industries. So that's everyone from partners like Amagi in media and entertainment, and Guidewire in insurance, all the way through to Here Technologies in automotive, or GE Healthcare in the healthcare and life sciences space. But really, like, what we focus on doing is helping achieve very industry-specific use cases and workloads that can be run on the AWS cloud through these partners. So we take a very long-term point of view with the partners, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit today as to how we can deliver these outcomes, because you're talking about pretty complex and regulated industries that customers who are using these solutions have to operate in. As I said, originally from Australia, I got a wife and two young kids, so they keep me busy outside of work. But I moved to New York about 12 years ago and have loved every minute of that. Do miss home a little bit too, so it's exciting to chat to you and some of the listeners in the region.
Excellent. And 12 years in New York. You haven't been with AWS all that time. What were you doing before AWS, and kind of what's that interesting part? Because there's always this interesting part of how people get into the partnership land, as we call it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I didn't grow up wanting to be a partner leader. I didn't have that as my Halloween costume or anything like that. Yeah. Although I don't even know what that costume would be. But I worked at KPMG, so I was in consulting for a while. I worked with them in Australia and then moved over to the US with them. That was great experience working with a lot of financial services companies primarily and helping them with whatever they were doing in terms of regulatory or risk transformation. That sort of led me to more down a technology path with them. And then had the opportunity to move over to Bloomberg, which, in addition to a TV channel, is a pretty large financial services software company, and worked there for 4 years. And that's really, Des, where I got a little bit more of an understanding of how a technology company thinks about growing their business and growing their revenue. And that was also at the time when some of the cloud adoption was taking off. So that was in 2014. And obviously AWS had been around for a while. You were, I think, at Microsoft at that time too.
That's right, yeah.
That was really where that was ramping. And to be honest, software companies at that stage were sort of figuring out, like, is this a friend or a foe or a frenemy? Like, how do I think about cloud? And I think really that, if you fast forward 10 years now, it seems like a no-brainer. But in the 10 years since then, really, like, cloud and some of the hyperscalers helping technology companies go to market and grow their revenue, we've obviously seen an exponential amount of growth there. And that's really where I got a flavor of how partnering or partnerships can really help mutually benefit two different companies, and then sort of have landed with the AWS Marketplace, the AWS Data Exchange, and the partner team here at AWS, and have sort of gone to the other side of that equation, if you want to think about that, going from a software company to one of the hyperscalers.
Yeah.
So the short answer is I sort of fell into the role, but through experience and really learning from a lot of colleagues and other professionals I've interacted with about how to be successful individually in these different roles, but also importantly, how to make the company successful through partnerships.
Great, man. And when I think about it, I think about as partnership leaders, where let's take out this, let's remove the art and science conversation and put that to one side right now. But when I think about the ability to have an impact, and we call this, I suppose, being a driver of partner impact, which is the impact that you're being able to drive within your partner ecosystem, either individually or with multiple types of partners or multiple partner relationships. For me, it's remove the art and science, and let's just talk about two key points. This point around relevance and value, and maximizing your relevance and value. And I kind of feel that these are two key levers that as a partnership professional, you are always trying to kind of pull at the right time and with the right strength. So when you think about maximizing relevance and value to be a driver of partner impact with your partnerships, where you've got technology partnerships, industry partnerships, and highly specialized, do you have a framework that you use or a methodology that you use to understand number one, the viability of the partnership, number two, understand the opportunity that partnership may present, and have you got a way to kind of put that thinking together for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So there's a bit to unpack there. Certainly at AWS and Amazon, we have some pretty structured planning processes that we go through every 6 months to formulate our operational plans. And really, for my organization's role, that's about furnishing the customer demand signals within each of the different industries, with and through our sales team that are talking to those customers about what they're trying to achieve with the cloud. We then synthesize that into some common themes across each industry, and then each theme will have some specific use cases within that industry. And for as broad and as large as AWS is, we've got more than 100,000 partners from 150 countries. 70% of those are domiciled outside of the US. So it's a huge partner ecosystem, and there's millions of active AWS customers. From an industry perspective, ironically, all of that synthesizes down to about 50 unique themes and about 170 use cases. So
just
very broad. Yeah. But for the customer base that it is and the partner base it is, you can keep it pretty simple.
Yeah.
And then really what we do then is work with our partners then to identify, to be very honest, where there's differentiating value proposition for their solutions running on AWS. And really identifying for them where there might be some capability gaps that we don't really have, either an AWS native service or an existing partner solution that is fit for purpose for that use case for those customers. Or, and this is where there's a high level of trust that's needed between any partner or partnerships, where we might be overcapitalized in a certain place, where there might be already, a bunch of incumbent partners that are already working with AWS or any of the other hyperscalers, where we can be a bit more proactive and transparent to a new prospective partner that, listen, if they're making a trade-off decision on their roadmap, from the AWS perspective, we believe there might be a bigger opportunity for them that they can capture value faster in this sector over this sector. And that's really where I think, having that level of prescriptive guidance, or at least trying to achieve that, it's not an exact science. And, I've oversimplified that for you there. But our partners really appreciate that level of guidance and perspective from us, and actually would ask for it more and more and more frequently, which I think is a really healthy thing. And from the AWS perspective, starting with what's the differentiated value proposition, really helps our AWS salespeople when we're trying to talk to them about all of the different AWS technologies that are available to them, plus all the partner solutions, really making sure that they're positioning to our mutual end customers some really clear, tangible benefits for them about why they might be looking at a partner solution running on AWS. So that's kind of the overall mental model.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
getting to the question behind your question, though, we have very structured mechanisms with our partners to actually make sure that we can discuss, ideate, iterate, and then implement those things.
So, and there's so much that you've unpacked there as well. So I'm going to double click on a few things here. The first thing is the role. What is the AWS partner business's role in trying to articulate that with those particular use cases? Because I think what we often miss is we miss the richness that you as a vendor have in terms of customer signals, customer intent, the research that's going on into product development, etc., particularly at an industry level. And then on the other side, where we've got this ask of partners is we need you to go and pick an industry. We need you to particular customer segment. We need you to pick a particular technology alignment that you can go maybe deeper and specialized in. And often those questions for a partner is very challenging. Maybe not in your segment where you have a lot of these, let's call it GSIs or global partners or very specialized partners. But when we think about the 100,000 partners that you do have, and we think about probably 60% of them are not those GSIs or those SI partners, what guidance would you have for other leaders to really try and make that connection around or help partners understand where they should specialize and why they should specialize? Is it purely a data-driven decision, or is there something else that you need to understand with partners to be able to get to that point with them?
Two things. There's certainly like, I think maybe like if I can wrap it up into one area where I would recommend people focus on, and then there's multiple components to it. The two things that I mentioned, we've really seen our most successful partners lean into business planning with AWS as a holistic, inclusive, and very detailed process. So what I mean by that is, we can make it very transparent as to like, here are some of the themes and use cases across all of the different customers in industry, as the example you and I are talking about here. We could send that list out. If we're not then going through that list and diligently, as part of our mutual plan that we're putting together with you as a AWS partner or a prospective partner, and identifying where there are matches in terms of your business priority as a systems integrator or as an ISV who's
Yeah.
trying to work with AWS. And Des, it's like funny, silly little things. Like a partner might say, we want to go to market with you in Malaysia. Well, okay, we don't have a region in Malaysia yet. We are launching a region in Malaysia. So is that the best focus for Q1 of next year? Or is
Yeah.
that something that we're putting a little bit on the longer term? Likewise, we have many partners say to us, we'd love your help expanding into North America. Okay, that's great. But if you as a partner don't have a sales team in North America or a relationship with a redistributor or a reseller in North America, like, we're probably not set up for success there anyway. So it's not really a plan we've got there. We've got like a sort of pipe dream that we want to
Dream or
explore there.
strategy, a bit of a longer term strategy that we want to work towards. But what's the immediate thing that we want to try and get done right now?
And those things are great, that we're aligning on some North Stars of like, what does it look like in 3 to 5 years? But don't kid yourself that that's a plan for next year to deliver tangible outcomes and ultimately revenue for your business in Q1 or, even throughout 2024 if you're thinking about those plans for next year. And there is a lot of times where, you would say hindsight's 2020, but yeah, you go through that planning process. You've put things in the plan that really we were set up for failure right from the start there, and then we wonder why halfway through the year we're not hitting some of the goals that
Yeah.
were more hopes rather than a well thought out goal. So yes, it can be a data driven approach, but it's also the willingness to have what might be some of those harder conversations up front. And I think that's probably the biggest misconception that maybe partners might have of AWS and a hyperscaler, like being prescriptive, being clear on what we should and should not prioritize. Like we talk about ruthless prioritization here at Amazon, and we deliberately use those words uh, together, right? Prioritizing easy. Ruthless prioritization is you've got a list of 10 things that you want done, and you would love to do all 10 of those things. Like it truly pains you to drop a few off the list.
Yeah.
That's why it's ruthless prioritization. And doing that with partners, I think maybe there's a misconception out there that like AWS doesn't value that feedback or that level of true partnership. But in fact, it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Those are our most successful partners.
Yeah, I think it's like if I think back at my time at Microsoft, there was often those conversations, which is, well, really, are you working in the best interest of my business, or are you working in the best interest of your own business? And I think that there is a myth there. I think the myth is you and your partners will always have economic needs that you need to fulfill through the partnership. But at the same time, it's really been about being super clear about what it is you are actually able to achieve versus what you are trying to achieve. And I think if you can separate those two, and be ruthless about really there's the economics that we're trying to achieve here, then you can have a more fruitful partnership. But I do agree with you. I think there is a myth that there is a big myth around this across anyone that's partnering.
Yeah, and I think like asking, be proactive and pointed with the questions that you have for any large partner or a hyperscaler partner you're trying to work with. Like ask them the questions like, where are there customer demand signals where you see a current gap that we might be able to fulfill? Like if you're asking those questions rather than like, how can you help me go to market in this specific geography, what you're doing there is you're automatically putting yourself in a position as a partner of like, how can I add value to you, hyperscaler? Because it's clear to AWS how like AWS might be able to add value to the partner business because of our very large customer base. But that's why it's a partnership, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this other point that kind of, I think we go back to the maximizing relevance and value. Is this, what would you're a senior leader, what would you have? Would you have partners saying to you on building plans that are so tightly aligned to AWS's plans, both whether it be your customer segment or your product prioritization, that when you change, those partners have to pivot at the same time? Or would you rather have partners that are super clear on their success and can kind of take those threads that you are giving them in terms of the data, the customer segment, where you're focusing your priorities, and combine that into their success? Like, what works better for you?
The latter in the long term, for sure.
In long term, yeah.
Because I think you and I have mentioned multiple times in this podcast already, like mutually beneficial. And I think for the long term, those partners, listen, at the end of the day, like we are looking to invest, many years, if not decades, with some of these partners to support our customers in what they're trying to achieve using AWS's technology. So it's not going to be mutually beneficial to our customers and our mutual end customers if a partner is chopping and changing with the wind every 6 months in terms of maybe AWS's priorities or specific priorities in a specific technology aspect in a specific industry. So in the long term, like to make sure that a partner has some flexibility tactically to adjust like where we're prioritizing go to market, but it has to be mutually beneficial for that partner's business where it's sustainable for them in the long term
Yeah.
in terms of their cost of sale and their margins. Because we want our partners to be successful, we want them to become more profitable, and we want them to improve their cost of sale and reduce the customer acquisition cost that they have on AWS
Yeah.
for the long term, not just in a quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So bringing it back down, if you had a definition for an investable partnership, what would a definition be that you'd give to that?
An investable partnership for us is one that provides clear, differentiated value to our mutual end customers with well-defined, well-constructed, and well-used mechanisms to keep the teams as aligned as possible.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So let's talk about, I
I
think
made that
let's
up on the
move.
fly too. I hope people
No,
don't
that's
think I
great.
had that
That's
written
great.
down.
That's great. We recorded it and so it shall be. So let's talk about we talk about those mechanisms. We talk about this mutually beneficial. We talk about this long term. Let's think about this long term view that you take to partnerships, particularly in your role.
Yep.
When you think about this long term view, is this long term view is it a focus on actually trying to help you break through particular customer segments? I kind of call this intuition, which it's vendor intuition. So there's this intuition that you have from an AWS perspective as to where this industry is going, where the market opportunity is kind of going. And then there's partners that are trying to read these particular signals and understand, well, if this vendor, AWS, if this vendor is making a bet now on automotive, as an example, yes, there's a lot happening in the automotive industry, but what is the intuition that I need to draw from that? Or how can I draw that intuition from that? Is it about having really strong relationships with people at AWS in different segments and being able to draw on those signals? Or how should partners sort of cultivate some of the intuition that they need to understand where you are heading and what they should be thinking about in their long-term relationship with you?
So Amazon and AWS's culture is pretty unique. It's pretty well publicized that it's we try very hard here to minimize bureaucracy and leave a lot of teams, like we call them two pizza teams, which is a group of people that can be fed by two pizzas, and like really empowering those teams to operate with autonomy and empowerment. That makes it really hard if you're a partner to just be trying to find who's who in the zoo as to like who might be in the path to success for you. Now, we do that by design because we think it indexes further on speed and execution for our mutual end customers. But that's really why the AWS partner organization exists, and leaning on your partner development manager as a partner or prospective partner for AWS. It's part of their role to help you navigate the AWS ecosystem, because by design and unapologetically, like there isn't just like one really simple org
Yeah.
chart or like request that you can log and then suddenly everyone around the world at AWS will pick it up and respond to. That's by design because we want those teams, as I said, to be able to execute really quick. So what I would recommend to partners is be very clear on the differentiated value proposition their product has to a specific customer or set of customers in an industry. Ideally, if you have customer references or something publicly that we can articulate to teams internally, like here's an implementation or here's a successful implementation that we've done with a customer that's like this in an industry. Those are always really helpful. and then being very specific on that plan that we just talked about at the start, because the spray and pray approach here is going to be very time consuming for your alliances and channel resources, and probably not going to drive the impact that you want. So where we see the most successful partners is they're very willing to open up and ask those hard questions that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They're very clear on what their value, their solutions, or in the case of an SI, implementation and the value proposition that they've done has delivered to customers in the past. Or if you're starting out fresh in an industry, you're very transparent with that, but you're clear as to why you think the solution is differentiated. And then you're very clear and prescriptive on what you want to achieve when. Those are the partners that culturally just like mesh so
Mesh,
well with
yeah.
AWS,
There's a click.
because we're
There's a
so
good click.
data driven, we're so goals orientated, we're very specific on what we want to achieve, but unapologetically don't care how we go and achieve it. And that's really where I think the most successful partners or prospective partners can really lean into that cultural match.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. When I think about it, I think that if you think below, if you have to think about a partner operating model and you have to think about, well, if 10, how do I get exactly what you have described in terms of that tight alignment, tight engagement? There's these two things that we think about in investable partnerships that vendors can't teach partners this. Partners need to be able to teach this themselves or find out. And these two things are, you've got to have currency. You've got to have relevant currency, which is relevant currency with where your vendor's at, where the market's at. And you've got to, that currency goes into your go-to-market, your value proposition, the technical skills that you have aligned to that are at the particular point in time that's going to allow you to create some really strong impact in the market with your vendor. So relevant currency. And the second thing is being decisive in the action that they can take in their business. And when we say being decisive, it's not about being decisive in, I'm going to make a decision and stick with it. It's about being able to have a well thought out decision-making process that says, my vendors told me we're moving in this direction. I've used these signals, this intuition to understand why they're moving there. I can put that to one side. I can now position my business or my technology business and where we're heading, and I can make a really quick decision that kind of gets, are we in or are we out? Is that where we're going? Or actually, we can add X to what you're doing in this particular industry. So it's those two things which are really clear. And then there is a third thing, but it's kind of linked to it, which is this being clear about how they operate their own business. But that's more an operational piece, which we don't really get to in the partnership space. So in building these industry partnerships, no doubt what you are doing globally is you've got partners, you've got customers, you've got sales teams surrounding your customers and driving that internally. You've got, and they gold particularly differently to your partner team who are building these partner plans, building these partner long-term plans, and trying to kind of bring the customer at the center and bring these sales and partner teams together. There's this, we spoke about it in Denver when we met in Denver a couple of months ago, and we spoke about this healthy tension between the internal sales, direct sales teams, as well as partner teams. And our audience on the Investible Partnerships podcast are exactly these. Yes, they're vendors, but they're also direct SaaS companies who are now building partner programs, and they've got to balance this view of gold differently, but mutually we're trying to get to that same customer. How do you think about that, and how do you resolve that tension at AWS?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a few different ways we do it, but certainly goals and incentives is fundamentally like how we do it at scale. So we have very specific incentives and goals for our customer sales team to make it as undifferentiated for them as possible as selling like a native AWS solution or a partner solution that runs on AWS. Because you want to make sure that and we have a leadership principle at Amazon that would dictate that everyone at Amazon should do this, but we want to make sure that the goals and incentives for our sales team are matching that leadership principle, in that they need to be focused on delivering whatever the best outcome is for the end customer. And if that happens to be a partner solution that's running on AWS or a native AWS service, whichever one the customer chooses, you want to make sure there's no active disincentives for the sales team there. And then also in terms of the programs that we have, we do a whole bunch of work, as you can imagine, on enabling training our sales teams on AWS native technology that we build. We want to make sure that they have the same access when they need to draw upon it, and the same experience that they have with AWS native services when they might need some more information on best practices in terms of architectures of implementing a partner solution. And so that's why we do things like foundational technology reviews with our partners, to make sure that when an end customer is looking at a partner solution as opposed to an AWS native one, that it has gone through some form of review from a solutions architect at AWS to make sure it's been optimized for the cloud. And if it's software as a service, there's been a review on where the data is residing and what controls and governance is in place. So for a partner of AWS, making sure you've got an operational process where you can be as responsive as possible. We're not asking for 1 hour SLAs here, but if any of our sales teams or their customers are asking them questions about a partner solution, we want to make sure that we can connect that customer to the right stakeholders at our partners ASAP, so we can get them a first-class experience in terms of assessing and then onboarding a solution. So I think those are some of the fundamentals, Des, about that process. The other aspect, though, and it's by design as to why our AWS partnership organization exists, is sales teams are on variable compensation, and they have annual quotas, and they have to hit those annual quotas. And we're getting towards the end of the year, and so sometimes people are looking for short-term revenue. That's okay. That's important for any business to have, as people that are hunters and are going to get the revenue when you need it in a given quarter. But you also want to balance that short-term point of view with a longer-term point of view, where you want people that are thinking 2024, 2025, 2026. So if there is an optimal solution for a customer that they implement now that might take 3 years to ramp up in terms of full usage, but that is going to be the best durable long-term solution for that customer. We don't want to have short-term incentives outweigh or discourage that. So that's really why that healthy tension is by design, and it should probably be by design too in terms of some of the partners that we work with or software companies that might be listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I really think it's important. It's ultimately, we have a short-term revenue goal, and the short-term revenue goal, if you just think, is the next 90 days, because that's the quarter, and we can build a 12-month, 24-month plan, but at the same time, you still need to operate in this, in these cycles. We call these momentum cycles. You have a momentum cycle. Typically 90 days is a good one. And absolutely, if you're in any business, you need to make revenue, and revenue's got to be one of those particular pieces of that. So I think that kind of thinking is quite similar to how anyone would be running their business as well. I wanted to touch on, we've had Google, AWS, and Microsoft quarterly results recently, and one of the points that kind of hit me was, I think it's more than $100 billion of cloud commits in each of the organizations that came through. So I think AWS was like $80 billion in pre-cloud commits that customers have, which is, if we kind of think about it, these customers have brought a specific cloud commitment to run particular workloads. There's financial incentives around that piece. And there kind of feels to me like there's going to be this whole move from partners to kind of go, well, let's follow the money and let's just go find those customers with those cloud commits. Do you think, like, how should partners think about this when we think you've got customers that have cloud commits, you've got AWS teams that are trying to get those customers consume those cloud commits? How should partners think about having a conversation with AWS around that? Is it just a normal positioning of the partner value proposition, what they've got, what they might have in the marketplace? Or is there something that they should be doing differently? Because I can imagine it's going to be pretty crowded in the number of partners that are trying to go and help those customers consume.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that we've introduced, and we're continuing to expand on it within the AWS partner organization, is a whole bunch of analytics and insights for partners just around the topic in general of like helping us triage and prioritize the target customer list. So we'd actually started a lot of this technology in the context of the AWS marketplace, and more recently have expanded this. But we do run analytics for partners on target customer propensity to buy, and we run that to give partners a list of who we think are the highest potential prospects
Yeah.
out of the list versus the ones that might be on the lower end, without disclosing any of the underlying customer data, because obviously that's really sensitive and proprietary. But it really helps partners sort of understand, like, from an AWS perspective, beyond like just commitments to AWS, but like if it's an AWS marketplace potential customer, like have they purchased from AWS marketplace before?
Yeah.
So therefore, like, you know that the procurement teams of this customer are very familiar with the process, taking into account a bunch of different parameters to come up with those scores that we eventually get back to partners that help them stack rank, like where their sales team should be focusing on really leaning in and aligning with the AWS sales team, so we can focus our attention. So we already have a whole lot of those analytics that we've made available to partners. We've actually got a similar type of analytic that we make available to our sales team. So that's actually helping match a potential partner solution for a customer use case or a customer problem that their customer is trying to solve. So we're actually trying to help solve this for the sales team, where like their customer might be like, hey, I need a new solution for KYC and AML on AWS. Who's the partner? Think about it from our sales team's perspective. They go, oh, I don't know, let me go to the AWS marketplace to try and find something. Well, we're giving them some insight and analytic too to help them best fit partner solutions for their customer use cases.
So I suppose from a marketplace point of view, treating that marketplace as that landing zone for a AWS seller or a customer coming in to understand what solutions there are. You know, partners should probably be thinking a little bit more about how they structure that marketplace offering, what that marketplace offering really entails. What are you seeing? Are you seeing pretty much vanilla text, or are you seeing partners think quite clearly and cleverly about what they are positioning on that marketplace to differentiate or stand out?
Definitely the latter. And there's actually a whole bunch of materials which are publicly available. We can put them in the show notes or something, Des.
Yeah, sure.
You know, about a training academy we have that really articulates to partners what helps make their listing stand out, what's best practices in terms of stuff that, in our opinion, you should just have on your listing, to make it really simple and easy for not only potential customers to find your solution, but importantly, after they've found it, you know, there's a whole bunch of compliance and legal and procurement processes that they need to go through. And AWS Marketplace is fantastic because it automates a bunch of those steps, but it, you know, there is inherently some back and forth questions that a legal department or a compliance department might have about a piece of software. And we've launched features like vendor insights that allows those prospective buyers to download things like compliance reports, like SOC attestations. But there's many more things that I'm sure many of our vendors that might listen to this podcast are like, we've answered this questionnaire 1,000 times for every prospective customer. But the more you can do that up front, I mean, it's just removing that time in that procurement cycle as much as you possibly can. So there's a bunch of best practices that we can share with the team.
Great. I'll grab some of that and we'll put that in the show notes. So one of the things that every partnership leader has to do is go find some investments for running particular partner initiatives or investments in partners. If you are going to be building a long-term vision for a partner, a long-term plan for a partner like you do in the industry team, no doubt there's an engineering investment, there's a go-to-market investments, there's probably investments that are there that you can capitalize on, but there's probably asks that you need to take back to the business, particularly if you want to break through or prioritize a particular industry. Now, this is really, it's a tough conversation for anyone in partnerships to have with the rest of the business. How do you take a business case forward for investment in partnerships? Maybe is there a couple of things that you should be thinking about all the time, and what makes a good investment that you take forward versus a bad investment that you take forward?
Yeah. I really try and keep this simple. It's what's the impact to the business? And I think a lot of people like go to revenue there as like the initial answer. That's ideal if you could tie it back to revenue or incremental usage. But for us, like, you need to be able to succinctly answer, and I mean succinctly to the CEO if they ask that question, like, what's the impact to the business? Succinctly answer that in a few sentences. So for us, that might be there is a brand new cohort of line of business users that we would love to have running those systems on AWS, but we can't without partnership with XYZ partner that we're currently like thinking about doing something with. It might be as simple as, well, there is a very large opportunity with a cohort of customers in a specific geography where this systems integrator, is the incumbent. They have all the relationships with these customers. We're launching a region there. And so we think partnership with this company is the best way for us to scale AWS adoption as quickly. But if you can't like put that in a paragraph, the rest of your business case is probably going to be a hard slog to get approved. And we have a very structured process here, as you can imagine, about how we get those approved. And beyond that, like, one paragraph, we do go into different levels of detail on, like, do we have alignment with the leadership of the partner? Like, are they committed long term to this partnership? Just because the piece of paper says 5 years, like, what's the leadership commitment? Are they? And you can get some interesting signals out of it. Like, we typically, for our most strategic partners, like to do quarterly business reviews where we're getting the team together for an hour. It's like on a Zoom call, so it's not like there's a travel or expense budget, to just go over how's the partnership going, where do we need to make pivots, where are we at in terms of some of our key metrics, and what are some of the positive business trends and some of the headwinds we're facing. If you've got a partner that's not willing to commit to 4 1-hour meetings a year, then you're getting a little bit of a signal there that, like, maybe that mutual commitment, and to the point we've been talking about before, the mutual benefit, there's some little warning signs there. So there's a whole bunch of detail in terms of how we assess a business case, but fundamentally, mate, if you can't say, like, what's the measurement of the impact of this to the business, you're missing the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Get those fundamentals right, and you probably have the good number one opportunity for getting that investment, but number two, opportunity for best success as well.
Yep.
I like that. Excellent, Chris. It's been a great conversation, and I know we could go on forever, but I want to bring it home. I like to do things a little bit differently, and we've got a game that we like to play on the Investible Partnerships podcast. It's called the Partnerships Fast Five. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give you I'm going to start 5 sentences, and I want you to finish them with a one word or 1 or 2 word answer. You don't need to tell me why, just whatever comes to mind, you just fire it through. And there's no winners or losers, but there might be the best answers published at the end of the year. I don't know. Okay.
All right.
Cool. Ready to go? Okay, let's go. First one. Partnerships thrive on
being mutually beneficial.
Partnerships embody
the ultimate form of customer obsession.
Through partnerships, you can
expand your network and your impact.
Partnerships spark
transformational innovation.
And lastly, number 5, partnerships succeed through
this one's easy. Mechanisms, not just good intentions.
I love it. Excellent. Chris, you've been an absolute brilliant guest. I've loved the conversation, and thank you so much for giving up your busy time and schedule, particularly at the end of the calendar year. So for our audience that want to connect with you and learn a little bit more about what you do in your industry role and you as a partnership professional, how best could they connect with you?
Yeah, probably on LinkedIn's the easiest. We can put the link to my profile in the show notes too, or you can reach me through Des. I'm sure he'll be happy to connect me with any of you. But in all seriousness, Des, thank you for the invite today, and importantly, thank you for doing this. I think we need more as the partnership role and ecosystem and chief partner officer sort of title has continued to grow. Like, the more professional networks connecting people and sharing best practices are needed. So awesome work on putting all this together, and thanks to you and the team in Investible Partnerships.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. All the best.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Thank you for listening to Investible Partnerships. Subscribe wherever you listen, and visit investablepartnerships.com for the transcripts of today's show.